Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the web seminar, The Search for Meaning in Fuzzy Data. Can advanced statistical techniques be applied to qualitative research? Our featured speaker today is Brendan Light from BuzzBack Market Research. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the event. We will reserve time at the end of the presentation to answer any of them. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible during the Q&A portion. Now about today's featured speaker. Brendan leads research development and best practices for BuzzBack. In addition to continually improving the quality of the quantitative and qualitative methodologies and analytics of BuzzBack's research offerings, he pioneered BuzzBack's award-winning and patent-pending eCollage and Verbatim Viewer, and leads the future development and research strategy for BuzzBack. He continues to focus on leveraging the transformative powers of the Internet to evolve respondent engagement, operational efficiency, and visualization of analytics and insights. Brendan has over 15 years of client and research supplier-side experience, having also served as research director for Gray Interactive and as global director of Ipsos ASI Interactive. And with that said, I'd like to hand over the presentation to Brendan Light.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We're taking a slightly different approach than we have historically in what we're presenting with the data, and we're kind of actually asking the question ourselves on how we might be able to go about doing this, because it really is a learning process in terms of the extent of the potential of using analytics on qualitative data. There certainly is a history of having done it, but we're entering a world with online research that really is expanding the possibilities. So we're just going to look at some of the approaches we're taking to figure out what can be done. So starting out, just thinking about the differences between qualitative and quantitative data. People really tend to think of this in a very binary way of being very almost opposite types of data, and not really being able to play well together. In fact, it's quite often seen as being adversarial, and can actually get pretty hostile in terms of people really siding on one approach or the other. I think one thing that also is really important to always remember about qualitative and quantitative is it can apply both to the mode of data collection as well as the nature of the data itself, and it's always important to keep in mind which of those two that you're dealing with when you're talking about qualitative and quantitative. So just thinking about qualitative data itself rather than necessarily just the mode. Qualitative data really is meant to be much more exploratory in nature, tends to seem to be a bit more unstructured, and tends to be more applicable to personal interpretation of the data, and is definitely much more about exploring and discovering. Where quantitative data is a bit more rigorous in its attempt to classify and describe what is going on with the information in a repeatable and ideally representative and expandable way to a broader population. Tends to not have the depth of qualitative because we are trying to get that consistency necessary to analyze large sample sizes. But at BuzzBack, what we really try and do is look at ways to reap the best benefits of each of these two approaches to data. And we're a little bit different from most companies that try and do this in that we don't simply juxtapose qualitative data and quantitative data. What we actually do is try and quantify our qualitative data and then do analysis from that. So in terms of the ground we stand on in terms of this being something that is defendable, there actually is quite a long history of performing analytics on qualitative data. Even if you go all the way back to the Rorschach test, originally was designed purely as a qualitative exercise, almost, if you will, as a starting point for conversation, to really kind of uncover what's going on with within a patient and how they're perceiving things. But over time, what was discovered was if you had a very specific set of ink blots and you asked them in a consistent way, you would get types of responses that were consistent enough to be classifiable. And so with a lot of historical qualitative techniques, what happened is things that were originally qualitative evolved into things that could be analyzed in a more quantitative, structured way because you learn the types of information that comes out that can be standardized and can be made consistent. So what this has really informed us and how we approach this is that we start off with our qualitative tools not necessarily knowing what is going to be the optimal way to analyze in a quantitative way on the data. It is a bit of an exploration of our own to go about finding what that is, but we've been doing this now for 10 years, and so we are starting to get some really good insights into, especially for our own tools that we're developing and deploying, ways to have standardized implementation that allow us to analyze it in a quantitative way. So what we're going to do today is we're going to focus on just one of our tools. The data that we capture in this is very structured data. We also have tools that capture and analyze unstructured data. We're going to focus today just on structured. So looking at a few different case studies from our collaging tool. And really this is not about the insights themselves. It is more about the learning of being able to use these tools and how they can lead to unique findings. So first, just a little bit on our collaging tool. It is just the offline technique taken online and leveraging the incredible power of the internet to do a couple of things. One is it can be done much more quickly and easily than offline, so it's just a small portion of a study. It can be done globally, simultaneously, so we can have sample from around the world, and we can do it with very large sample sizes then, and slice and dice in a lot of interesting ways. But we also have the ability to capture all of the collaging data, all that transactional data in the background of what images are being picked, where are they being placed, what images are being used in conjunction with other images. So there's a lot of proximity data that we have available, and it allows us to really take some very new approaches to analyzing this type of qualitative data that simply is unfeasible in an offline application of a collaging tool. And so people can come in, they can create their own collage, and definitely find it's a much more enjoyable experience than your typical survey or focus group as well. This is an example of what a set of images might be for a study. We typically provide around 100 and 150. A lot of times clients want to use more, make this as expansive as possible. We found this was a good number because we find, one, tends to get pretty satisfactory response from people. They're finding stuff that gives us meaningful data with this. And the larger you go, the harder it is to get good frequency counts on images, and thereby making it a little bit more difficult to quantify your data. This is an example of the qualitative types of information we get. We apply traditional qualitative analytics, going through and trying to get an understanding. Visually, these things tell a very compelling story. The follow-ups that people give us, very compelling. We find that we get twice as much language in an open end if it's preceded by a collage than without it. So it's a very powerful tool just qualitatively, even if we couldn't go to a quantitative level. But we'll start to show you some of the stuff we're doing from a quantitative perspective. This first case study is the major leap we took here was in the color analysis, but there's a couple of other things in here as well. So just a general background study. We were looking across a couple of markets. We looked in the U.S. and the U.K., trying to get an understanding of how people felt about the notion of being green, that there's definitely a lot of green marketing going on, but what we didn't really know at the time was just how well was that connecting with people. Terms like sustainability, do we all define that the same way? What does it mean and how do we feel about it? So on the most very fundamentally basic level, what we're able to do in this qualitative exercise, it really is infeasible and pretty close to impossible to do offline, is quantify all of the images Because every respondent has the same image set, we're thereby able to actually quantify the images, very different from offline collaging. And so just on a basic level, we can look at what pictures are being used. We can slice and dice that by any kind of crosstabs available, do very, very basic correlation with other collage images or other survey data as well.